I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but here I am at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, needing to get this off my chest. This happened last summer, and I am still dealing with the aftermath. Sorry for the length, but I need to tell the whole story. My wife Sarah and I had been married for 8 years. Things weren't perfect, but I thought we were solid. Last June, I surprised her with a rental at this exclusive beach house in the Hamptons. One of those places with a private beach that costs more per week than most people make in a month. I'd been working 80-hour weeks at my law firm, and I knew I'd been neglecting her. This was supposed to be our chance to reconnect. The house was incredible. Right on the water, with about 200 yards of pristine private beach. The property management company provided everything, including a dedicated lifeguard during peak season. That's where Jake comes in. Jake was everything I wasn't. Mid-20s, perfectly tanned, the kind of guy who looked like he stepped off a fitness magazine cover. He had this easy confidence that I never possessed, even in my youth. The kind of guy who could make conversation with anyone and have them eating out of his hand within minutes. From day one, Sarah was different around him. She'd never been particularly interested in the beach before. She usually preferred poolside lounging, but suddenly she wanted to spend every moment on the sand. She'd put on her smallest bikini every morning and insist we head down early. I want to make the most of our vacation, she'd say with this bright smile I hadn't seen in months. At first, I was actually happy. She seemed more alive than she had in years. She was laughing again, seeming genuinely excited about something. I figured the ocean air was doing her good. I was busy anyway, still taking calls from the office despite promising this would be a real vacation. Jake was always there, of course, setting up the umbrellas, bringing us towels, making sure we had everything we needed. He was professional, friendly, called me sir, and Sarah, ma'am. But I started noticing things. The way his eyes lingered on her when he thought I wasn't looking. How their conversations seemed to go on longer than necessary. The way she'd light up whenever he approached. He's just being nice, Sarah would say when I mentioned it. It's his job to make sure guests are comfortable. Besides, he's practically a kid. But Jake wasn't a kid. He was maybe 10 years younger than us, sure, but there was something in his eyes that seemed older. Hungrier. And Sarah was eating up every bit of attention he gave her. The third week is when everything changed. That's when the accident happened, and I learned just how far my wife was willing to go to get what she wanted. So that Wednesday morning started like any other. I was on a conference call with Tokyo. Some merger that couldn't wait despite me being on vacation. Sarah said she was going for a swim while I handled business. Nothing unusual there. She'd been swimming daily since we arrived. I was pacing the deck, laptop open, completely absorbed in explaining contract details to clients halfway around the world. The call was running long, and I remember being frustrated because the connection kept cutting out. I had my back to the beach for maybe 20 minutes, completely focused on work. That's when I heard Jake's whistle, sharp, urgent, the kind that makes your blood freeze. I spun around and saw him sprinting into the water. Sarah was about 50 yards out, and something was wrong. Really wrong. I dropped the phone and ran, but Jake was already there. By the time I reached the water's edge, he was pulling her toward shore. She was conscious but coughing up seawater, clearly shaken. Jake had his arm around her waist, supporting her weight as they waded back. What happened? I shouted, running into the surf to help. Caught in a rip current, Jake called back, breathing hard. She got pulled out fast. Good thing I saw when I did. Sarah was trembling, clinging to Jake's arm. When they reached shallow water, I tried to take her from him, but she seemed almost reluctant to let go. I am okay, she kept saying, but her voice was shaky. Jake saved me. If he hadn't been watching. We got her back to the house, wrapped in towels. I wanted to call a doctor, but she insisted she was fine. Jake stayed for almost an hour, making sure she was okay, bringing her water, checking her breathing, asking about any chest pain. Very thorough, very caring. You, a hero, Sarah told him, gripping his hand. Thank you. The way she looked at him in that moment. I should have seen it then. The gratitude was too intense, too personal. But I was just relieved she was safe. After Jake left, Sarah was different. Quiet, almost dreamy. When I tried to talk about what happened, she'd just say how grateful she was, how Jake had risked his life for her. She kept touching her throat, like she could still feel the saltwater. That night, she barely spoke during dinner. Just kept staring out at the beach where Jake's chair sat empty in the moonlight. Maybe we should head home early, I suggested. After what happened today. No. The sharpness in her voice surprised us both. She softened immediately. I mean, I am fine. Really? And Jake said rip currents are rare this time of year. Lightning doesn't strike twice, right? I thought she was just processing the trauma. People react differently to near-death experiences. I figured she needed time to feel safe in the water again. I had no idea she was already planning her next swim. The next morning, Sarah was up before dawn. I found her on the deck at 6 a.m., already in her bikini, staring at the beach. Jake wouldn't start his shift until 8, but she seemed content to wait. You, up early, I said, bringing her coffee. Couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about yesterday. She took the mug without looking at me. I want to thank Jake properly. Maybe we could take him to dinner? Red flag number 1. But I was still in supportive husband mode. Sure, if you think that would help. When Jake arrived for his shift, Sarah practically bounced down to the beach. I watched from the window as they talked, her animated, gesturing toward the water, him nodding seriously. Then he did something that should have set off every alarm in my head. He put his hand on her shoulder. Not a quick pat, but a lingering touch. Intimate, protective. I told myself it was nothing. Trauma bonding. He saved her life. Of course there would be a connection. That's when my pattern started. Every morning, I get pulled into work calls. The Tokyo deal was heating up, and I was the lead attorney. Sarah would head to the beach for some sun while I handled business. At first, I'd join her after my calls ended, usually around noon. But gradually, those calls got longer, more urgent. Sarah would come back for lunch glowing from the sun, relaxed in a way I hadn't seen in years. How was your morning? I ask. Perfect. Jake taught me about reading the currents. Did you know there are signs you can watch for? He's so knowledgeable about ocean safety. Always Jake this, Jake that. How he grown up surfing these beaches. How he was studying marine biology. How he once rescued 3 people in a single day during a storm. She hung on every detail like he was some kind of mythological figure. By the 4th week, I wasn't joining her on the beach at all. Work was consuming me. The deal was falling apart, and my firm was panicking. I'd be on calls from 7 a.m. to 6 p.m., barely breaking for meals. Sarah would disappear after breakfast and return just before dinner, sun-kissed and secretive. Maybe you should take a break from the beach, I suggested one evening. You, getting pretty burned. I am fine. Jake makes sure I use sunscreen. The way she said his name, there was something proprietary about it. Like she owned it. That's when I started paying attention to details I'd been missing. The new bikinis that seemed to appear daily. How she shower immediately after coming back from the beach, humming songs I didn't recognize. The way she check her phone constantly, smiling at messages she wouldn't share. Who keeps texting you? Just my sister. She's having drama with her boyfriend. But I met Sarah's sister. She communicated exclusively through Facebook posts about her cats. The breaking point came during week 5. I wrapped up a call early, around 2 p.m., and decided to surprise Sarah with a picnic lunch on the beach. I made sandwiches, grabbed some wine, the whole romantic gesture. I walked down the path expecting to find her sunbathing, maybe chatting with Jake about ocean currents or whatever educational topic she claimed to be so fascinated by. Instead, I found Jake's lifeguard chair empty and no sign of either of them on the beach. That's when I heard the laughter coming from the dunes. I need to take a break from writing this. My hands are literally shaking remembering that moment. But I need to get it out. The laughter was coming from behind the main dune, maybe 30 yards from where Jake's chair sat abandoned. I knew I should turn around. Some part of my brain was screaming at me to just go back to the house, pretend I never heard anything. But I couldn't stop myself. I climbed up the sandy ridge as quietly as I could, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I reached the top and looked down into the hollow between the dunes, my entire world shattered. Sarah was on her back on a beach towel, one of our beach towels from the house. Jake was on top of her, and there was no mistaking what they were doing. Her legs were wrapped around his waist, her fingers clawed into his back, and she was making sounds I hadn't heard from her in years. Sounds she used to make with me, back when we were happy. But what destroyed me wasn't just seeing them together. It was seeing how into it she was. This wasn't some moment of weakness or a mistake. She was completely lost in him, whispering things in his ear that made him laugh, kissing him like her life depended on it. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds. Felt like hours, just watching my marriage die in real time. Then Jake spotted me over her shoulder. "Shit," he said, freezing mid-motion. Sarah's head whipped around, and when she saw me, I expected shame, guilt, something human. Instead, her face went completely blank for a moment, then hardened into something I'd never seen before. "David." Her voice was flat, like she was addressing a stranger who interrupted her lunch. I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Jake scrambled off her, grabbing for his swim trunks. "Look, man, I can explain." "No." Sarah sat up, not bothering to cover herself, her eyes locked on mine. "Don't explain anything to him." The contempt in her voice hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't my wife caught in a moment of weakness. This was someone who been planning this, someone who already written me off completely. "How long?" I finally managed to ask. Sarah stood up, brushing sand off her legs with casual indifference. "Does it matter?" "Yes, it fucking matters." The rage finally broke through the shock. "How long have you been screwing him behind my back?" She started getting dressed, taking her time. "Since the day after he saved me." The way she said "saved" with air quotes and a smirk made everything click into place. There was no rip current, was there? Jake was backing away, clearly wanting no part of this conversation, but Sarah looked almost proud. "I am a strong swimmer, David. I have been since high school. You know that if you paid attention to anything about me. You faked drowning? You faked a fucking emergency? I created an opportunity." She pulled her cover up over her head. "Jake here is studying marine biology, but he needs money for school. I told him I'd make it worth his while to play hero." The calculation in her voice was terrifying. This wasn't a crime of passion. This was a business transaction that had evolved into something else. "You sick," I whispered. "I am alive," she shot back. "For the first time in years, I am actually alive. Do you know what it's like being married to someone who cares more about merger documents than his own wife? What happened next still makes me question everything I thought I knew about the woman I married." Sarah didn't just lack remorse. She went on the attack like I was the villain in this story. "Don't you dare judge me," she snarled, stepping closer with her finger pointed at my chest. "You want to know what's sick? Being married to someone who treats you like furniture. When's the last time you looked at me? Really looked at me, without checking your phone? That doesn't justify." "Justify what? Finally feeling wanted? Finally being with someone who sees me as more than a trophy wife to trot out at firm parties?" Her voice was getting louder, more vicious. "Jake makes me feel beautiful. He listens when I talk. He makes me laugh. When's the last time you did any of that? I could see Jake in my peripheral vision, quietly gathering his things and trying to escape this nightmare. Smart move on his part. I worked those hours for us, Sarah. For our life, our house, our future. Our future? She laughed, and it was the ugliest sound I ever heard. What future? You sitting in your office until midnight while I sit alone watching Netflix? That's not a future, David, that's a prison sentence. So you decided to blow up our marriage instead of talking to me? I tried talking to you. For years I tried, but you were always too busy, too important, too focused on the next big case. She was screaming now, completely unhinged. Do you know how many nights I went to bed alone? How many anniversaries you missed? How many times I begged you to just spend time with me? And here's the thing that still haunts me. She wasn't entirely wrong. I had been absent. I had prioritized work, but instead of addressing it like adults, she decided to orchestrate this elaborate betrayal. You could have asked for counseling. You could have given me an ultimatum. You could have divorced me if you were that unhappy. Why? So you could drag it out in court for years while you bled me dry with your lawyer friends? She was pacing now, working herself into a fury. This way is cleaner. This way I get what I want without having to beg for it. What you want? You want Jake, the lifeguard who you paid to sleep with you. That hit home. For the first time, she looked actually hurt. It's not like that anymore. What we have is real. I looked over at Jake, who was now about 20 yards away and clearly wanted to be anywhere else on earth. Jake, hey Jake, tell her how real this is. He stopped, shoulders slumped, and for a second I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Look, this is between you two, he called back. I never wanted it to get this complicated. Sarah's face cracked for just a moment. I saw the doubt flash across her features, but then the rage mask slammed back down. See what you've done? She hissed at me. You've ruined everything. This is exactly why I couldn't trust you with the truth. You poison everything you touch. The projection was breathtaking. She orchestrated an elaborate affair, manipulated both me and Jake, destroyed our marriage, and somehow I was the one who ruined everything. We drove home in complete silence. 4 hours of highway with the air conditioning blasting and nothing but the sound of tires on asphalt. Sarah stared out the passenger window the entire time, and I kept waiting for her to say something, anything, that resembled an apology or regret. Nothing came. When we got to our house, she went straight upstairs and started packing. Not just vacation clothes, everything. Like she'd been planning this moment for months. Where are you going? I asked from the doorway. My sister's, until I figure things out. She didn't look up from folding her clothes with mechanical precision. Sarah, we need to talk about this. We need to figure out how to. There's nothing to figure out. Her voice was flat again, emotionless. I'll have my lawyer contact yours. That's when it hit me that she already thought this through. She had a lawyer picked out. Probably had been planning the exit strategy since before we even left for the beach. You've been planning this whole thing, haven't you? The vacation, Jake, all of it. She finally looked at me, and for a split second, I saw something that might have been guilt. But then it was gone. I've been planning to be happy. If that required leaving you, then yes. The divorce took 8 months. Sarah hired one of the most vicious attorneys in the city. Someone who specialized in creative asset redistribution, as she put it. Despite being the one who had the affair, despite orchestrating the whole elaborate deception, she came after me like I was the one who destroyed our marriage. Her lawyer painted me as an emotionally absent workaholic who drove his wife to seek affection elsewhere. They brought up every missed dinner, every late night at the office, every time I'd taken a work call during a vacation. According to Sarah's narrative, I was the villain who neglected her so badly that she had no choice but to find love elsewhere. The worst part? Some of it worked. The judge was sympathetic to the lonely wife angle. especially when Sarah's lawyer had her crying on the stand about how isolated and unloved she felt. She got the house, half my retirement accounts, and 3 years of alimony. But here's the kicker, and the reason I am finally writing this story. 2 weeks after our divorce was finalized, I got a call from my buddy who still had the beach house rental. Guess who Jake was caught with that summer? A married woman from Connecticut. 50-something, wealthy, going through what her husband described as a midlife crisis. Same playbook: fake rescue, affair, marriage destruction. Apparently Jake had quite the reputation among the local property management companies. They nicknamed him the Lifesaver, not because he rescued people from drowning, but because he saved bored housewives from their marriages. For a fee, of course. After hearing about Jake's Connecticut victim, I couldn't let it go. I hired a private investigator. Cost me a fortune, but I needed to know the truth. What we found was worse than I imagined. Jake wasn't just some opportunistic lifeguard. He was running a sophisticated operation. The pie traced him back 5 years across multiple high-end beach communities from the Hamptons to Martha's Vineyard to Cape Cod. Always the same setup. Exclusive private beaches, wealthy couples, bored wives. His real name isn't even Jake. It's Marcus Webb, and he's got a business degree from a mid-tier college. The marine biology student story was complete fiction. He researched the couples beforehand, figure out their dynamics, their problems, their schedules. Then he create the perfect rescue scenario tailored to each mark. The drowning, the jellyfish sting that required mouth-to-mouth, the pulled muscle that needed therapeutic massage. He had a dozen different plays, all designed to create that initial intimate contact that trauma-bonded women to him. Here's the really sick part. He kept detailed notes on each woman. What worked, what didn't, how much money he could extract, how long he could string them along before they caught on or their husbands got suspicious. Sarah was case file number 47. The Connecticut woman? She transferred $50,000 to Jake's account before her husband caught them. The woman before that in the vineyard paid for his tuition, minus $75,000 over 2 summers. He wasn't just breaking up marriages for fun. He was systematically destroying families for profit. I showed this information to Sarah's sister, hoping she'd pass it along. Maybe I thought Sarah deserved to know she'd been played by a professional. Maybe I wanted her to hurt the way I'd been hurt. Sarah's response, delivered through her sister. Even if that's true, at least Jake made me feel alive. David, you made me feel dead for 8 years. That's when I finally understood. Sarah wasn't Jake's victim. She was his willing accomplice. Even knowing she'd been conned, even knowing she was just another mark in his notebook, she still blamed me for driving her to it. The pie found 7 other women Jake had romanced over the years. 3 divorces, 2 suicide attempts, and 1 woman who lost her kids in the custody battle because her ex-husband's lawyers painted her as mentally unstable. Also, Jake could fund his lifestyle and Sarah could feel alive. I reported Jake to the police, but most of what he did wasn't technically illegal. Immoral as hell, but not criminal. The property management companies finally blacklisted him after word got around, so at least he can't pull this scam in the same places anymore. As for Sarah, last I heard she was living in Florida with some guy she met at a yoga retreat. Her sister let it slip that she's already cheating on him too. Some people never change. The whole experience taught me something important. I wasn't perfect in our marriage. I was absent, I was work-obsessed, and I did neglect her emotional needs. But there's a difference between being a flawed husband and being a sociopath who destroys lives for money and thrills. I am in therapy now, working on being present in my own life. Dating again, slowly, and I've learned to spot the red flags I missed with Sarah. The victim mentality, the inability to take responsibility, the way she could justify anything as long as it served her needs. Sometimes I wonder if Sarah ever figured out that Jake never loved her, that she was just another entry in his sick little notebook. But honestly, I don't think she did care as long as he made her feel special while he was using her. Some betrayals you recover from. Others change you forever. This one showed me who my wife really was underneath the mask she worn for 8 years. I am better off without her. It just took me way too long to realize it. Thank you very much for watching this story. Subscribe to the channel. Watch the video. I try very hard to make something really interesting and exciting.